Season 22 is right around the corner and is getting some massive updates in terms of ability changes and exotic armor reworks. Today we're going to go over everything you need to know, from some of your favorite class exotics, barricade changes, strand tweaks, and much more. Let's jump right in. Like Season 21, Bungie has a new wave of changes for exotic armor in Season 22, which should be announced in the next couple of weeks. The one primary goal for this balance pass was bolster underused exotics. They looked at several exotics that weren't seeing a lot of usage time in any game mode and targeted those for buffs this time around. In the process of doing so, they identified a few previously changed exotics that needed further tweaks. Across the board, these changes are largely positive and should make the exotics more useful and powerful. Let's first start with the Hunters with Knucklehead Radar. The functionality of the Foetracer exotic helmet has been completely removed from that exotic and added to Knucklehead Radar on top of its existing benefits. So from Foetracer, it gets visually marking targets, deals more damage to low health marked targets, and provides a small benefit to the airborne effectiveness stat of all weapons. Next to that, with Foetracer's functionality being removed, Foetracer is also getting its own revamp. We took some cues from the popular monochromatic Maestro artifact perk for this one. When you deal damage with one of your abilities, you gain a damage bonus with weapons that have damage types matching your subclass damage type. Additionally, when you defeat an enemy you've damaged with one of your abilities, either with another ability or with a weapon with a damage type matching your subclass type, you will spawn one of the collectible objects associated with your subclass, such as ionic traces or fire sprites. Next up, Lucky Raspberry. This exotic was a little too unreliable in its current form, so we've taken a crack at streamlining its energy gains while leaving some of the benefits intact. The exotic still expands the chaining capabilities of arc bolt grenades, but now instead of basing the grenade energy gains on those chains, each time you damage an enemy with a lightning strikes from the jolted condition, as well as each time you pick up an ionic trace, you gain additional grenade energy. We've also given this grenade the intrinsic ability to stun overload champions. Now you don't have to jolt them and then trigger the jolt lightning strikes just to stun them, making these grenades a more reliable tool against overload champions. And lastly, for Hunters, Renewal Grasps. They just have one thing here. They've undone the previous nerf to Duskfield grenade cooldowns when using this exotic. Now we move on to the Titans. Icefall Mantle, Doomfang Pauldrons, Path of the Burning Steps, and Eternal Warrior. Season 21 included some changes to Eternal Warrior and the Path of the Burning Steps. They've added an escalating damage bonus to arc and solar weapons respectively when you get kills with those damage types. They like that this gave players another way to get surge-like bonuses, but the Eternal Warrior seemed to have the most reliable way to get up to the tier 4 damage bonus. They made some further changes to these perks to make them a little more reliable, while also expanding the functionality of two other exotics. The second big change for Titans is for Feedback Fence. This exotic got a complete mechanical rework and now ties into the armor charge system, increasing its versatility and making it more useful in scenarios where you might not be taking a lot of melee damage. With the new perk, which completely replaces the old, when melee hits give you an armor charge, you take reduced melee damage while you have that armor charge. Taking melee damage causes you to emit a burst of damaging arc energy that jolts targets, consuming your armor charge and dealing more damage based on the number of stacks consumed. Note that damage dealt by the burst of arc energy should be comparable to the current damage for the 0 to 3 stacks of armor charge. And lastly, Hallowfire Heart. This exotic often stands in the shadow of the more ubiquitous Heart of Inmost Light. To remedy that, they've removed its base energy to solar abilities and replaced it with a perk that will let you build more into sunspots. They think you will be seeing many more sunspots in the battlefield as a result. As for the perk that greatly increases your ability regen rate when your super is fully charged, we've left that as is. And third, we have the Warlocks. Astrocyte Verse is first up. We've added 2 more pieces of functionality to this exotic. When you blink, the enemies near you when you reappear will be volatile. You can then leap away, triggering a series of explosions when you fire upon them. Additionally, when you're using the Nova Warp Super, the Dark Blink ability no longer consumes super energy. Geomag Stabilizers. We've often heard calls to restore the perk that let you top off your super energy by sprinting. The legacy of that incentive still creates some pretty silly play patterns. Instead, we wanted to give players a way to get more super energy, no matter how charged their super is. Now, picking up an Ionic Trace while wearing this exotic will grant Guardians additional super energy. Wings of Sacred Dawn. Leaning into the orbital weapons platform fantasy, we wanted to help players have a way to stay aloft longer, especially in target-rich PvE environments. Typically, reloading was the main cause for a float to end. This exotic now automatically reloads solar weapons, including the weapon you are holding from reserves each time you get a kill while aiming down sights. Try this one out with Xenophage. And then Winter's Guile. Due to the nature of the Stasis Warlock's melee ability, this exotic was previously a disappointing choice for that subclass. We've added a new perk for this one, specifically for when you are playing your Stasis subclass. Now, combatants encased by your Penumbral Blast melee will automatically shatter after a short delay. So that's what we got for the exotics. Let's now move on to abilities. Here are the goals for the abilities for Season 22. Reduce the uptime and potency of Barricade abilities, particularly in high-level PvP activities. Reduce the potency of Striker Titan in high-level PvP activities, both in neutral game and when supers come up. Correct the one-size-fits-all nature of Suspend in Combat Sandbox, and rebalance our Strand Fragment suite to bring up some underperforming options and normalize the potency of overperformers. In PvP for Barricade specifically, they say the prevalence of barricades can slow down the pace of play in a manner that doesn't have much in the way of meaningful counterplay. Bungie is making some base level changes across different barricade abilities, primarily targeting the strength of Towering Barricade. In Season 22, Towering Barricade's base cooldown will be increasing significantly, and all barricade objects will receive a reduction in their maximum health pool. Towering Barricade base cooldown increased from 48 seconds to 70. All barricades maximum health reduced from 600 to 500. Damage resistance versus PvE combatants increased to compensate. Next up, Striker Titan. It probably won't surprise you to hear that Striker has been significantly overperforming in high-level PvP activities like Trials of Osiris. This update will target Thundercrash and Knockout. Theoretically, Thundercrash is a one-off super, but in practice its kill potential is closer to that of a roaming super, so we're updating its base cooldown to reflect that. As damage dealt and received is the primary factor in super regeneration rates, particularly in PvE, we believe this change will be felt most strongly in low player count PvP like Trials and Competitive, without being too disruptive for our PvE strikers. Thundercrash increased base cooldown time from 500 seconds to 556 seconds, matching the majority of our roaming super roster. Knockout is currently too forgiving in letting players clean up engagements with melee attacks early in a duel, especially when combined with other melee enhancing atoms. For Season 22, they're reducing its damage bonus against players, but they'll keep a close eye on whether that should remain for future adjustments, so reduce damage bonus versus players from 50 to 30. Lastly, we have Strand. While they're happy with the way Strand has shaken up the sandbox across modes, there are a few outliners they need to address. First up is Suspend. When designing Suspend times, they had a couple of different options. They landed on this longer duration to differentiate Suspend from Stasis Freeze. Having seen the way this has played out in the live game, they don't believe this is the right place for Suspend to live. To address these problems, they're making a suite of changes across both Suspend and its supporting atoms to better carve out a healthier role for Suspend in this sandbox. The base duration of Suspend is being reduced significantly. They further reduced it against champion combatants to ensure that they remain a core focus in combat, a problem for the fireteam's survivability that needs to be addressed with urgency. They've also reduced the energy regeneration granted by Thread of Mind and Thread of Generation. We don't believe the ability uptime these two fragments grant to suspending atoms is healthy for the sandbox. So here's a look at the changes for Suspend, Thread of Mind, and Thread of Generation. In combination with some of these Suspend changes, they want to shift some of the potency to other Strand atoms to allow for more diverse options for Strand users, in particular increasing the power of Threadlings and Sever in PvE and increasing the availability of Tangles across all modes. They're also taking the time to address feedback on a handful of Strand abilities and aspects. The Threadrunner's Silkstrike Super is a bit unforgiving in the live service game, particularly in PvP, so they made some small changes to improve its usability, increasing damage resistance, reducing suppression time between Silkstrike Super air attacks, and reduced vertical lift provided by Silkstrike's heavy attack to reduce instances of missing the primary target. For Threadrunner's Threaded Spectre, it should now be much more effective in PvE, as it will hold enemies' attention longer, and the Casting Hunter is now effectively invisible to enemies for a couple of seconds after creating the clone. The Broodweaver's The Wanderer aspect is strong when thrown, but it was somewhat hard to use in more difficult situations, making it dangerous to leave the safety of cover to grab a Tangle. While this aspect is equipped, destroying a Tangle with your weapon will now weave the Wanderer, which surges upward and detonates, suspending any nearby enemies. They've also increased the Wanderer's detonation range and damage. They've heard consistent feedback with the Strand Grapple Melee and how it wasn't working as players intended, particularly for hunters and warlocks with ranged melee abilities. Now, pressing your melee input consistently activates the Grapple Melee lunge instead of activating your charged melee. While shifting some of the power of Suspend to other Strand atoms, they took the opportunity to make some of these Strand fragments that correspond to Threadlings and Sever more attractive picks. Also, small changes to increase the ease of use of Thread of Wisdom. All of this is coming in Season 22 and some more changes too. They say tune in on the launch day for the full list of changes and bug fixes, including a fix for Celestial Fire's Scorch not activating melee perks like Sunbracers. So there you have it, Guardians. That was a lot to read, but you have ability and armor changes for Season 22. Some of these might seem annoying, not sure how the community is going to react about the Suspend, Strand changes, but some of the changes to the exotics do seem pretty cool, and let me know your favorites in the comments below. If you'd like to see some more Destiny news, lore, and mysteries like this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.